Good morning and welcome to the show. My name is Sean Smith.
And my name is Prescott Phillips, and this is Brew City Bug Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. How's it going today?
It's good. It's cold.
What do we got going on today?
Today we're going to look at transmissions, the differences between them. Just a quick rundown of what to look for if you're looking for a transmission.
We're talking about Volkswagen Transmission 101. We're going to talk about only Volkswagen Beetle manual transmissions. Of course, there's
no auto sticks,
no
bus transmissions.
No bus transmissions. And we're just going to give you a rundown of the most common things to look for and identify a transmission. So if you go to the junkyard and you're searching through, you want to know what you have and what's the easiest way.
Or you want to know what's in your car right now, or the car you're looking at maybe.
Yeah. And what the easiest way to identify it is. So we're just going to give you a breakdown of what we think are the most common ones, and we'll put together a list for you and help you out the best we can. And just a little disclaimer, not all of this is set in stone. So the transmission you pull out of the junkyard might have been worked on before, and it might not have these gears that are the gears and stuff that are inside.
Right. They're very interchangeable. It's just like typical Volkswagen stuff. It's a lot of interchangeable parts. So just because it says this, it has this,
or just because we say it has this, doesn't mean that it's always going to have that.
Somebody might have been in there monkeying around and changing out stuff. So
take this with a grain of salt. We're going to give you the best information we can, and we'll go from there.
Yep. You might wonder why we're all bundled up like Eskimos. It's 13 degrees outside.
It is Wisconsin.
It is Wisconsin. It's January what?
January
13th.
13th.
And it's cold outside now. I think it was 8 degrees when we came out here. So
yes.
Anyways,
we got a heater going. We're nice and warm.
It's warm in the shop. We're fine.
Yeah.
What we're gonna do. This is chronological here, oldest to newest. These first 5 are stock transmissions.
Actually, first I wanted to discuss the one that we don't have. The first Volkswagen.
Let's discuss the one we don't have. They're called split case swing axles.
Why are they called split cases?
Well, it's because the case splits right down the middle, and they pour all the gears in one side and put the other half on. That's a split case. It's in an earlier car. It'll be a 1961 or older.
And why don't we have that?
We don't have those because most people, they're very expensive to rebuild, for one, because there's no parts. 2, they don't handle any horsepower. 3, they don't have synchros. So they're called a crash box because every time you switch a gear, it sounds like it's coming apart. So we don't have those. We don't have one to show you, but you'll know right away if it's got nuts and bolts going right down the middle. It's a split case.
So straight.
Yeah, it'd be right. There'd be nuts and bolts through here,
and it would split in half. So we don't have that.
And the axles would be attached with no way of taking the axles out like this, because you got to install the differential with the axles already installed. It's a pain. Everybody hates them. You're better off converting your split case transmission car to a later tunnel transmission. It's called a tunnel because the transmission part of the transaxle is in a tunnel, and it's much stronger, much better design. So
so what do we have first here?
This first, we're going to call this a swing axle 6-volt. Now you're saying, just looking at it, or you can tell it's a swing axle because it's got this type of side cover, all right, and that attaches here on the axle tubes. So you know it's a swing axle, and we're gonna guess that it's a 6-volt by this curved arm. The arm is curved,
opposed to
the straight arm.
The straight arm.
Now this, more than likely, it's a 6-volt. More than likely, it's going to have a 437 ring and pinion in it. And if you're lucky, it's got 4 bolts holding the ring gear instead of 6 bolts holding the ring gear to the differential. But this is, if it's got a curved arm, more than likely 6-volt. The next one is another swing axle. See, same diff. But the arm is straight. Now, there's no guarantee that this is a 12-volt swing axle, but there's a fighting chance. It's got a straight arm. It still could be a 6-volt. The difference between a 6-volt and a 12-volt case is this area in here is bigger for a bigger flywheel. A 6-volt flywheel is smaller than a 12-volt flywheel. Now, you can put a 12-volt flywheel into a 6-volt case, but you're going to have to machine a couple little spots. This spot here, 2 more spots up here. That's where the ring gear is going to interfere.
And how do they machine that out?
You can, really doesn't matter. Any way possible. A grinder, a die grinder, something, anything that removes material.
So it's basically like a test and fit process.
Yeah,
you grind some off, you take your new 12-volt flywheel, you put it up there, you make sure it's clearance properly.
And make sure it goes to this depth. The transmission case between a 12-volt and a 6-volt, other than how the flywheel fits and the starter bushing is different. Other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. So can you put a 12-volt motor against a 6-volt transmission? Of course. Can you use a 12-volt starter instead of a 6-volt starter? All you got to do is use the adapter bushing. They make a bushing that goes into a 6-volt case, and you can bolt a 12-volt starter up to it.
Okay.
So but there's no guarantee that just because it has a straight arm, it's for 12-volt. It's a fighting chance.
Now, do you say there's no guarantee because it could have been worked over by somebody, or did the factory?
The factory never made a telltale sign that it's 12-volt, 6-volt.
And one thing you got to remember is when Volkswagen was assembling these, they would use old parts.
They would use parts till they ran out of them. And that's how you got got these rare models. You know, a Zwitter is a perfect example. It's an earlier car it's a newer car with an older dash. Okay. So Volkswagen didn't throw anything away. They put some of it in stock for replacement parts, but then they just ran out the line. So that's where we come in. You know, it's like more than likely it's going to have this, but it might not, depending on what they had left over at the factory.
And that's why we're trying to put out this information so you get the best fighting chances possible to know what you have when you purchase one of these transmissions, or if you have a transmission that you're trying to identify.
Right. Now we're going to talk about how to identify your transmission by using the transmission code stamped in the side of the transmission case. On late model transmissions, they stamped letters in the beginning of the serial number, which dictated what was inside that transmission and what year car should be in. There's a milled pad on the starter side of the transmission. There's a milled pad with hand stamped numbers. Okay, this one is an AT. This is a Zigzag IRS transmission, and it's got a 388 because it's AT. This one also says AT. This is the number you need to know. This number right above it here is the casting number, the 113-301-103L. That's the part number for this case. Just the case, nothing inside it, just the case. This number here on the milled pad is specific to this transmission, and that'll tell you what's inside it and what year basically it came out of. Here's another transmission, another IRS, AH. AH is a 412 ring and pinion. The second letter, they're mostly A's. Everything starts with an A, and then the letter after the A is what you need to know to know the gear ratio and basically what year this came out of. The older transmissions, the swing axles, didn't have the letters. There's no A, there's no letter at all. It's just numbers, hand stamped in this milled pad. Again, the 113-301-103. The swing axle had the same part number as a single side cover IRS. So it's that number is the number everybody uses when they're selling this online. They take a picture of that number. It's meaningless. You need to know this number here. This is another swing axle, 6-volt. Again, just numbers. Those numbers will correlate to a chart, and that'll dictate what this came in. But the older ones, no letters. The newer ones all had letters, and you can look on a chart and look up those letters and find out exactly what's inside of it. As long as nobody else has been in there, changing the ring and pinion or changing anything. So if it's rebuilt, it might not be what it's stamped, but at least you got a fighting chance of finding out what's inside of your transmission.
So Volkswagen Beetles, they had two different styles of suspensions. The early ones were swing axle, and later on went to IRS. IRS is independent rear suspension. These 5 transmissions here run the gamut of everything we're going to go over. Earlier than this is a split case that's 61 and earlier, 62 and newer, 62 through 79 in the United States. So that span is what we're going to cover here with these 5 transmissions. The first 2 here are swing axles, first swing axle rear suspension. You can tell that from the side covers. And then we move into IRS, which has CV joints and has flanges that the axles bolt onto. Okay, we're going to break down the difference between the 2 swing axles, the 6-volt and the 12-volt. We're calling this a 6-volt and this one a 12-volt. More than likely, this has a 437 ring and pinion, and more than likely, this has a 412 ring and pinion. No, again, no guarantees, but if it's a 12-volt swing axle, it's probably going to have a 412. How to tell the difference between the axles themselves? The earlier cars had short axles. Shorter axles, early cars, later cars, long axles. That changed in 1967, roughly.
And so we brought out some axles here to kind of give you a better...
Yeah, I'll measure each one. Now, this is a pair for short axles, and this is a pair for long axles.
So the short axles would have been in the earlier model, is what you're saying?
Yep, early models, and you measure the overall, it's like 26 3/4.
Okay.
That's the overall. And then this part of the axle tube is shorter, okay? That's like 3.5, okay? The tube part are identical on these, okay? The tube distance from here to this flange has to be the same because that never changed in the cars, okay? So then you go to the long axle, 67 or so, and this is quite a bit longer, okay? 28.5 roughly. And then this has another 4 3/4. Okay, so if you know what you're looking for, if you're looking under a car and you can't hardly see what's going on, just look for this length. You'll see the part number. This part here, see how much different that is here than here?
So what you're saying is the easiest way to identify it if it's on your car is to measure the length
Of this casting.
of that casting there.
Yeah, you'll know right away whether it's short axle or long axle. Okay, now we're going to go over the later model transmissions, IRS transmissions. They came in 3 varieties we have here, going from earliest to latest. They're called IRSs because this is the axle. They went to CV joints. This is a more modern cars have the same setup. They bolt onto the flanges. So 1969 is the big year it's the first year for IRS, unless you consider 1968 Auto Stick that had this IRS, and that kind of started the whole automatic transmission.
Which we talked about earlier that we weren't going to really touch on auto sticks.
We weren't going to talk. Yeah, we weren't going to touch.
Focusing on manual transmissions today.
So from the factory 4-speed IRS gearboxes started in 1969, and that's what this would be. It'd be a 412 for sure. It'd have 2 side covers, basically the same transmission as a swing axle, with the differential converted to an IRS. The rest of the transmission, pretty much the same. Same mounts and all that kind of stuff. So this would have been 1968, 1971-ish is when this transmission was in use. Then you get into 1972, 1973. I don't know exactly, like Sean had mentioned, they used what they had. So there's not a definite cutoff date where it definitely changed. And plus, These cars are 50 years old, 60 years old, whatever. If you have the original transmission in your original car, it's a miracle.
And if it hasn't been torn apart or touched by a mechanic.
And then if it is the original, it's a miracle if somebody hasn't been in it and fixed something. You blew up reverse, whatever.
And see, that's fine. Our viewers understand that. We're just trying to give them
that's
a
why
breakdown.
I'm not getting really crazy about what day, what year, what month. It's pretty vague.
This is transmission 101, so you're getting the basics here.
Right, and you're gonna have a 1969 with a 1974 transmission, and it'll bolt in.
It happens.
It happens all the time.
Okay, so back to this.
So the middle one here is the next
iteration of transmission.
Yeah, it's the next 4-speed that Volkswagen started putting in Beetles. Obviously, it only has one side cover.
So what is this called? This is called
everybody calls them a single side cover.
Single side cover IRS transmission.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences here. You can see this arm is longer. They usually have a 3-bolt nose cone. This switch here is for a neutral safety switch. A lot of things change. Now, you'll notice that this one says 388. That's no guarantee.
But what does 388 mean?
388 is the ring and pinion gear ratio. That's like this says 412. Almost all these double side cover gearboxes that are 12 volt are going to have a 412. 412 is the most common ring and pinion gear ratio.
So one of the bigger improvements that they did when they went to the new iteration of transmissions is they stepped it up to 388 ring and pinion.
Yeah, and you'll notice as the years went by, as the horsepower increased, the gear ratio decreased. It's because with more horsepower, it didn't need to spin the motor so hard to get it going at the same mile per hour. So as horsepower increased, and to get better gas miles and make things last longer, they just dropped the gear ratio down. And they did it across the board with the ring and pinion. So early ones had a 437, 437.5 if you want to get technical. Then they went to a 412, 4.125, and then finally they ended up at 388, which is 387.5. Everybody rounds it up to 388, and that's what you have until the end. Now the next one is in the newer cars. I don't know exactly, 1975, 1976, you'll have what we call a zigzag.
Why do they call it the zigzag case?
And it's a zigzag because this seam is doing a zigzag. That's what the factory never called them that. It's just the
most common terminology.
It's a term that everybody can understand.
Now, what is the benefits of that zigzag and why?
This zigzag case is notably the strongest. Why did they put the zigzag in there? Well, that's because all the force from the ring and pinion, the ring's on this side, and the pinion's here. Well, when you put a load on it, it wants to push that ring gear away and push the pinion gear away. So to make that stronger, they just moved this rib over. Didn't cost them anything in material. They just pushed it over. So that made this area stronger. This is the load side of the transmission. This is the coasting side of the transmission. They eliminated this other side cover when they stopped making swing axle buses. The buses had the ring and pinion flipped over because it had gear reduction boxes on the axles. That meant the transmission had to spin backwards, and that's the whole reason they had side covers on both sides. Once they didn't need that in a bus, the bus went to its own transmission. Then we went to this case, and then this case moved on to this case. This is the final design that Volkswagen put out. They beefed up the side covers. They put a better, stronger first gear in them. This has all the good stuff, and this is the best. If you can find one of these, pick it up. It's going to be guaranteed. It's going to have a 388. It's guaranteed. It's going to have a 378 first gear, and it's going to be the strongest stock Beetle transmission. Now, can you make this transmission stronger than this one? Absolutely. There's still weak things that they never addressed, even in this rendition. But you can see the side covers got stronger. The side cover on this is just your basic side cover. No ribs, no nothing. Just your basic, both sides have the same thing. Then you go to this one. It's got a rib down the middle, and it got stronger. And then this final one, that the rib in the middle got even bigger and even stronger. This is a very strong side cover. If you want to cheap out on your high performance transmission, you can find one of these side covers. They're, you know, it's a beefy deal. Well, the beauty Volkswagen had with their transmissions is you can convert one into the other.
What do you mean?
Well, they both share the same case.
So you have a
general case.
You have a swing axle and an IRS here.
Yeah, I have two transmissions. They're both tunnel transmissions, and they both share the same housing. Okay? The only difference is the differential and the axles. So if you take these side covers and this differential, you can put it into this case. Same thing vice versa.
Hold on. All right, so back up here. So this is a IRS.
IRS.
You can take the internals from
Yep.
the IRS and the side covers and gut them and put them into the internals of a swing axle.
So you might say, why would I want to do that? Well, maybe there's you can't find what you need, right? You have an IRS car and all you can find is a swing axle. But there's nothing wrong with your differential or anything. You blew up reverse, your case is all rotted out, for whatever reason. Something's wrong with the transmission part, but the transmission part in this one's fine. So you're going to take this, and the ring and pinions are interchangeable. Now you're going to have to reset your backlash and your preload and stuff. That doesn't go away.
That's more in depth than what we're talking about. We're just
Right,
trying
but
to explain.
just to say, if you can, I'm saying yes, you can.
Okay.
Right? You can take the differential guts out of this and put in this case, or vice versa. Make this case, make an IRS a swing axle. It's a super common, because everybody's restoring their swing axle car, and we're running out of swing axle transmissions. So, can you convert an IRS to a swing axle? Absolutely, as long as it's a two side cover IRS. All right, now we're going to touch a little bit. We're not going to get super in depth with, but we're going to touch on high performance aspects of transmissions. With everybody building big motors, and a transmission's the next in line to go. So
what we have here?
What we have here is two cases, and they're empty. And one's a stock case. This is a stock case, but you'll notice on the bottom, it's got gusses welded on, and then this one is a actual magnesium. It's called a Rhino case. These cases are directly from Volkswagen, and not available anymore. But the aftermarket has stepped up and started making these. MP makes them out of aluminum now. They're called White Rhino or.
So what you're saying is this case right here was an original from Volkswagen?
Yes, Volkswagen made this, and this was actually the only bare case you could get from Volkswagen. And it's a special casting with this great big, all this extra ribbing and gussets on the top rather than a stock one.
Now, what was the purpose of all the
Volkswagen
ribbing?
did that because they had trouble with these cases cracking through the middle at the top and a bus with reduction boxes. Reduction box bus has the ring and pinion on the opposite side. It's got it on the starter side instead of on the driver's side. So it's on this side, which puts the load on this half of the transmission. Remember before I said that this is the coasting side and this is the pressure side? Well, they just flip-flopped that, and by flip-flopping that, they put the load on this side of the transmission. So to combat this cracking going, you usually went from stud hole to stud hole or up in here. To combat that, they beefed up this area here. We're just going to touch a little bit on high-performance transmissions because we talked about the case, we talked about the different and which one's stronger and whatever. And we're going to talk about your basic upgrades to a stock transmission. Once you increase the horsepower of the engine, you need to make a transmission handle that horsepower, of course. What we have here is the differentials and side covers and stuff for a IRS and a swing axle. This is a factory swing axle differential. It only has two spider gears, and the smaller spider gears, the 10-tooth spider gears, those would go in here. This is what's commonly referred to as a super diff. Super diff, all it does is add 2 more spider gears, increasing the strength, doubled it, doubles the strength because it's got twice as many gears. Believe it or not, this is what moves your car down the road. These gears up against the spider, or this gear, is what drives you down the road, is this gear touching that gear. That's what pushes you down the road. When these blow up, you're not going anywhere. Make it last longer, you double the amount of teeth, and plus this whole housing is much stronger and stays together. So this is what's commonly called a super diff. That's a swing axle. Later on, they went to 10-tooth gears, and that would be in this, an IRS.
So that's a super diff for an IRS.
Yeah, and those gears go in here.
Go inside there, and they all connect with the...
Yeah, and the pins connect 4 spider gears. Now, you can't interchange the 10 teeth and the 11 teeth.
You can or you cannot?
You cannot.
Okay.
You got to pay attention because early IRS differentials had 11-tooth gears. These are the side cover super diffs for IRS and swing axle. Now we're going through this in the order of breakage, okay? What's the first thing to break? Usually spider gears.
So when you put more power to your motor, the first thing to break in your transmission is going to be...
Yeah,
usually. Is usually going to be the spider gears.
Spider gears. That's the first thing you want to beef up.
So the order of breakage is what we're calling this.
Yeah. So the next thing in line, and these two things usually go hand in hand. If you're putting a super diff in, you're kind of dumb not to put a new aluminum side cover. All the factory Volkswagen stuff is all magnesium. This is thick aluminum. It's heavy. It really takes some abuse.
So HD stands for heavy duty side cover.
Yep. So this is the IRS, and then this is a swing axle. It's identical to the factory, except this is aluminum. It's got more ribbing, and it's stronger. And this, I've seen people put these on both sides. Not really necessary, but this will beef up the pressure side, the force side of the transmission when you put one of these on. Without going into the transmission end of it, main shafts and gears of that sort, the next thing to really take abuse is the case itself. So the factory case can be beefed up, and that's what this case is here. It's a factory case with ribs on both sides. It really needs a rib on the force side, which would be this side. This is where the ring gear is. The ring gear wants to push away, and the pinion gear wants to ride up on the ring. So it puts a big load through here. There's a great big hole here, and there's holes where these studs go, and it wants to blow right through there. It wants to crack that in half. So this is a perfect example of a beefed up stock case. A lot of people now, with the age of all this stuff, these cases are getting beat up. And it's hard to find a case worth welding all these gussets on. The factory made these cases, and they've made these a long time. This is a magnesium rhino case, it's called. This is the factory case for a bus. And it's beefed up where you need a bus to be beefed up, but it's not beefed up down here. See, these are identical looking at the bottom.
But now you say bus, but this can be used for a Beetle, correct?
Right. The only difference on this portion of it is where they put the ring and pinion.
So
they put the ring gear on this side for a bus. They put it on that side for a Beetle.
So an aftermarket rhino case that you would buy is essentially a bus case.
Yeah, essentially.
And it works, and it's stronger, and it's beefier.
It's universal. You can make an IRS out of it, a swing axle, whatever. This portion of any tunnel transmission, called a tunnel because this is the tunnel where the gears and the transmission end of it is, this can be made into anything. Bus transmission, IRS,
swing axle.
Yeah, swing axle, whatever.
And it's the main positive for it is it's beefier, and it's
beefier up here already because it's for a bus. And if you add gussets like this, you just made this case very, very strong. This is the same thing I run in my Pro Stock. It's just gusseted, and I run a great big gusset. I gusset this whole side from here to here just to keep the pinion connected to the ring gear.
That's
So,
a whole nother video. We're just overview
we're just touching the base on high performance stuff.
and the line of breakage of what to
Right.
expect when you start adding more power.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother video. We'll get into high performance transmission builds, but this will give you a good overview of what you have, what you're looking for, what's out there.
Transmission 101. The next order of breakage that we wanted to talk about is the axles.
Yep, axles are the next thing to break after you beefed up everything else inside the transmission. It's going to work its way out towards the tires. Now this is a stock short axle. You can see how it's skinnier here than it is down here, and where they're going to break is right here at the smallest cross section. This is one aftermarket sway-away axle. You'll notice that the diameter here is the same as down here. You might have noticed too it's a little shorter. Now this is 3 inches shorter for a race car. Nothing you need to really worry about, but they're all the same at this end. This doesn't choke down, and this is much beefier. Not only because there's more material, but this is better made material. You know, it's not just whatever stock ones are made of. The stock ones handle a little bit of horsepower, but they're going to break eventually. And the aftermarket axles, they're not cheap, but they're good insurance.
All right, so that brings us back to here. One thing that we didn't talk about when we were going through all the transmissions was a Freeway Flyer.
Yep,
it's one of the
Freeway
most
Flyer.
common upgrades that you hear about when you're buying a new transmission. What is a Freeway Flyer?
Freeway Flyer has everybody confused, and it is what people want it to be. All you're changing is the gear ratio for the final drive to get on the freeway. Everybody complains about a Volkswagen turning way too many RPMs on the freeway.
So when you're driving down the freeway, your engine's spinning, your RPMs are so high, you can only go so fast because of the RPMs.
Yep, RPMs are up there, and it's driving you nuts. You want to go faster, but the thing's already kind of wound out, and you make enough horsepower to pull more gear, but you don't have more gear.
So what was the fix?
The fix was a Freeway Flyer.
And you just said a Freeway Flyer.
It could be many things.
What
I consider a Freeway Flyer, and most transmission builders consider a Freeway Flyer, is a transmission with an 82 fourth gear.
Which is this right here.
And Volkswagen never put an 82 fourth gear in a Beetle.
What did it come in?
It was a bus-only gear for the gear reduction box swing axle bus transmissions. It changed the RPM. Since the gear reduction axles changed the RPM so drastically to make it easier to get more speed out of the bus, they changed the final gear, fourth gear, from an 89 to an 82. So it only came in a gear reduction box bus, and it never came in a Beetle.
So what builders will do is they'll take the gear, the 82 tooth gear,
82 fourth gear
out of a bus, and they'll put it
into a Beetle.
And
then that's what most transmission builders consider a Freeway Flyer, regardless of what ring and pinion is in there.
Don't get us wrong, there's more entailed into it. That's just the general overview of what is done. And we just wanted to touch on that when we were talking about our Transmission 101. Since we got onto the performance aspect of it, a lot of people also want to know about a Freeway Flyer.
Right.
So that's all we have for the show today. I hope you retained some of the stuff that we had talked about. Remember, this is just a overview. This is 101. This is basically, I went through and I was looking at videos and information online, and I couldn't find anything that had it all wrapped up in one. So that was the whole point of making this video, is to try and give you guys who are newer, or maybe somebody who's been in for a little while and wants to know more, basically a general overview of what there has to do with transmissions.
Yeah, we should throw a disclaimer in here. This isn't gospel. I probably gave you some wrong information, but
I hope you did.
Yeah, but it's a general. Like I said, these transmissions probably been in and out of 10 cars before they finally got junked. So what you have, and some of these transmissions, I know one of these for sure has already been gone through. So what they did to it after they put it back together, who knows? It might be a Freeway flyer for all I know. So it's all this information is for you to
take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
It's not gospel, but it's most likely correct.
Don't blow up the comments with all this.
But if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can always email us at BCBugTalk@gmail. You can check us out on Facebook at BCBugTalk on Facebook, Instagram, and obviously
message
YouTube.
us on any social media, and we'll answer your questions.
Yeah. We're going to put together a list of basically a quick reference guide. It'll go over some of the material that we talked to. That'll be posted to our Facebook page, so you can go there and you can basically download that image or that PDF, and that way you'll have something if you want to hold on to it, or if you basically want to use some of this knowledge. With that, you got anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's it. We're going to sign off now.
All right. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Peace out.